everyone, thanks for joining us for another episode of The Ghost Furnace. I am Bond, and I'm here with my cohort, Nick, Pennsylvania. How you doing, Nick?
It's been an up and down week.
It's been a little rocky.
It's been a lot of bit of rocky, a little bit of sweet. I know you know a bit. You don't know everything.
Right.
but you're more informed than the average person. So last week, in the process of preparing to put a shed in, we made a pallet, like a platform for it. And in that process, I managed to break my toe. Now, I didn't know it was broken, and I continued to work on it. And then that night, I noticed it was bloody around the top, and I cleaned it up, did all the good stuff, went to bed, and then in the morning, I realized not only was it damaged, but it's totally swollen.
Ugh.
And it's like dark black, purple, and I'm like, well, I've done that again. I could show you a picture, and if you vomit immediately, we'll know.
My brother has a tendency of screwing up his toes. Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah, you did a number on that. Yeah, trust me, everyone. You don't want to see that. It's
so then last night. So what you can't see, but you could probably hear, is that my eye is totally bloodshot and weeping because a cat ran and just in a panic, apparently around 3 a.m. last night, ran across our bed and directly I thought I was being punched in the face by an intruder. Like a cat stepped directly on my eyeball while I was dead asleep.
Yeah.
I sat up, fist swinging and shouting. Nobody else in the house woke up, apparently. Not a single person.
Sleeping soundly.
My God, yes. And so I felt like my eye was swollen. Because when you get allergies, sometimes or you get a sty and you'll blink your eye and you feel it.
Yeah.
I got that going on. And nobody told me. I had work meetings. I had to drive pretty far out. Nobody told me. I didn't realize until my daughter said something when I picked her up. And I was texting my coworker. I'm like, I didn't realize. I told you the cat thing, right? She's like, yeah, you told me the cat thing. I'm like, my eye is totally bloodshot. She's like, yeah, I thought you knew. I didn't say anything. So it's been rough. Everything hurts. Everything's kind of stupid. But
on the plus side,
earlier this week, I was, when I'm on the road, I kill time in antique shops and thrift stores, and there's a couple senior centers I go to because I've heard some stories from dirty old men and women, and those are my favorite men and women. There was at a Goodwill, there was a little 8-inch, maybe 9-inch, 9-inch TV Magnavox packed in 1992. And I'm like, you know what? $6.99, half off. I definitely bought it.
You're not typically a gambler, but that's
I was rolling the dice with this one.
Yeah.
But I tested it at the thrift store, and it came on. The snow was there. I was able to change channels. There was volume. I'm like, you know what? I spent more on coffee than this, so I take it home, and because I'm like, you know what? I'm not a religious person, but I'm pretty sure this is what the good Lord intended.
Yeah,
Coleco and NES to be played on, and I'm a little nostalgic right now. I'm gonna buy this wood grain sided Magnavox, and then I realized, I don't have an RCA to RF coaxial adapter. So I went to the Ace Hardware and I got a coaxial, and I'm like, okay, cool. Those are for kids. Those are the ones that are the screw into the back of the television set. They don't really exist anymore. They've been supplanted not only by RCA, but HDMI inputs and everything. So, okay. Today, my travels in passing brought me through Kane, Pennsylvania, the crown, the star jewel of the Allegheny National Forest, the only national forest in PA. There's a Radio Shack in Kane, my friend, and their hours are 10 to 3 most days, 10 to 3 in the afternoon. And I'm like, you know what? I bet $1 they have an RCA to RF I go in and by gum, there it
They
is.
do.
There it is. And you know what? I was looking at the counter there too, and they also had a brand new. You remember the cassette recorders where it would play tapes, but it had a little handle that would slide in and out, and it was just
Oh
a
yeah.
single cassette thing.
Yeah.
But it also had line ins and everything. I mean, they were making these in the 70s through the 80s, and I had one, and it died on me recently within the last couple of years. They had like a brand new model there. I didn't get it, but I'm like, I'm gonna come back for you. I'm gonna come back for all of you.
Reason to
I
go back to Kane. Yeah.
I felt like General Patton talking about the Philippines or something. Anyway, the guy had it, and I'm chatting the guy up, and I'm like, my favorite little tabletop. I hope Jim Harold's listening. My favorite
Right.
tabletop shortwave is this little Radio Shack one I have with the digital tuner and everything. And the problem is it just eats batteries. I really want to get an adapter for it, but it's a 6-volt negative tip,
Which
which is not super common. So we're chatting. He's like, you know what? He's like, I probably have 70 of them, but I need to know the catalog number. So I definitely got the dude's email,
oh, that's cool.
and I'm so happy that Radio Shack is up and alive and well and super handy. And the guy was very nice. And I'm kind of kicking myself because he had some CB
Oh,
hatches. I
yeah.
should have bought one because that would look pretty dope.
We're gonna have to take a trip back soon. It sounds
Yeah,
like.
there used to be a Radio Shack not far from us that was open until a couple years ago, and it was,
Hmm.
I swear to everybody listening, it was right next door to a Kmart
Right. That's how you
in the
know.
Vandergrift,
Yeah.
Pennsylvania area, and Kmart was had four or positions available, and my friend Chris and I debated long and hard the merits of what if we got a part-time job at Kmart for a month to say that we did, and
Yeah.
I'm afraid we missed the boat on that
Yeah.
one.
Missed the boat on that one. Oh,
So,
jeez.
so it's been a
It's been a week. It's been a few days. Been a.
highs. The highs have been high, but the lows, they've been mighty low.
It's the breath of the human condition that you're
So let's
experiencing.
Yeah. So let's talk about some high things because we had that story last week and you did a bunch of research because you just were captivated by the story of the Pinnacle Man. And you in that research kind of followed the breadcrumbs to a place just a few miles away at Hawk
Mm-hmm.
Mountain Sanctuary. And apparently
Yes.
this whole area is just chock full of stories. I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Yeah. So, like you mentioned, while doing research on the Pinnacle Man story, I kept coming across references to other haunted stuff in the area. And again, this is what we're talking about today is called Hawk Mountain. It's the Hawk Mountain Sanctuary. And it's just a little bit west of the Pinnacle, which is right near where Pinnacle Man was found. This is again in like southern Berks County, specifically Albany Township, in Pennsylvania. And I just like, when we research a lot of these things, you come across like other weird little things, but sometimes things just like catch your attention and you're just like, oh, I need to look into this further. And I started looking into it while researching the Pinnacle Man. And I was like, you know what? I need to put a pin in this and come back to this next week because otherwise I'm going to go down a rabbit hole. And that's what I did. So the thing that really caught me and made me stop in my tracks and research this and honest was a reference to what may be one of the earliest serial killers in America, purportedly.
Really?
That's that is the exact way that I said it out loud to my cat whenever I read it. I said, really? So again, what we're talking about is Hawk Mountain. And this place, like we said, is just lousy with stories. There's stuff all over the place. So, but what we're generally going to be talking about is the area around the Schambacher Tavern. People say that this whole area, like we said, is just haunted. In a lot of places, they reference the mountain itself being haunted, saying that there is something evil in the mountain. It's a very kind of like Lovecraftian elder god type thing. I like the idea of like a deep one living beneath Hawk Mountain. That's just kind of cool, very metal. But so where these stories seem to start is there was a family called the Gerhardts, which were living in a cabin at the base of Hawk Mountain in 1756. There was eight of them. And at this time, they were attacked and killed by Native Americans, supposedly. Now, in a few places, it references these being Lenni Lenape tribe members. Other places, it says Delaware specifically. Um,
Well, Delaware, my understanding, and I've been wrong before, but I'm almost certain that Delaware and Lenape are the same.
I wasn't sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
because it seemed like some places were using them interchangeably, with the possible accuracy of this stuff already being so long ago and being like, you know, dubious possibly.
understood.
Not so, but that's what's reported. Both are reported. So apparently what happened is this was apparently sacred land, quote unquote, and they attacked them. So seven of the eight family members were murdered in this raid, but there was one 11-year-old Jacob who was in the woods when this happened and saw the whole massacre happen and couldn't help his family. Jacob was after this thing happened, he was raised a few miles away by a neighboring family, and then eventually, whenever he was older, returned to this area and built a new house where the cabin had once stood. Now, this is what is now referred to as the Schambacher Tavern. Um, it's pronounced a few different ways and spelled a few different ways. The most consistent one I found is, like I said, is Schambacher, Schambacher. But it shows up a few different ways in places if you're looking this up yourself. So, like we said, Jacob built this house and sold it to George and Priscilla Bullock in the early 1880s, and then in 1850 to Martha and Matthias Schambacher. They're the ones that converted it into like a tavern and inn, and additionally built a barn and some other kind of like outbuildings on the property. So this tavern slash inn, you know, if you look at the area on a map, especially a contemporary map in the 1850s, it's placed in a pretty advantageous spot. Basically, if you're heading into the wilderness to the west or to the north, it's one of the last like decent places to stop. And apparently, it was known for its Blue Mountain tea.
A vintage unknown to me,
Yeah.
which I feel like just like when you remember I got on that Yaupon Holly thing,
Mm-hmm.
and one of my students just came back from the Hatteras area in
Oh,
North Carolina and
yeah.
brought me some Yaupon back. I think we need to explore this because again, you and I got on a big kick with Red Zinger
The
many
red
years
zinger,
ago.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, we tend to do kicks of tea. Yeah.
Indeed.
But so yeah, so they had this Blue Mountain tea and that drew patrons and it was kind of famous for that. And because it was in such a good spot for especially traveling merchants, apparently. After a while, the community started to notice a few things. One is it noticed that some of these travelers would come through the area and then not come back, which isn't
Not typical,
not
yeah.
yeah, not terribly unusual. However, I guess this Matthias guy started to get crazier and be more and more aggressive as he got older. You just kind of get the rumor mill starting, like is what it seems like at first, that people are like, oh, like, you know, he's killing his patrons and everything and stealing their money and stuff like that. Then you have reports of him always cleaning blood. Apparently, there's just blood everywhere in this place all the time, and that starts to concern people. While this is all happening, the place is already getting a bit of a reputation for not only being dangerous because of this guy, but also haunted. People already start talking about just the bad vibes in the area. Um, Ghost lights very specifically, and just, you know, kind of rumors of evil in the area. That again, this is in 1850, so, you know, less than 100 years or about 100 years from this apparent, you know, raid that took place. And again, we're on like the edges of civilization at this time in this area, so like people people knew who was coming in and out of the area. So when people went missing, it was something that people would have over time, especially, you know, started to notice and talk about. Now, when it seems like this really kicks off from a folkloric standpoint is on March 10th, 1878. Matthias takes ill and he ends up calling for a local pastor. He apparently makes a deathbed confession to this pastor, saying that he killed multiple patrons. He said he stopped counting between 11 and 14. He would chop them up. He would throw the body parts down the well. He would scatter the remains throughout the countryside and let like animals just take care of them. And not only that, but apparently he made some of them into sausage and then would feed them to his patrons.
Well, that's a new angle.
That's well, it's new, but is it?
Well,
I feel
it does make me think of the Benders,
it
the
makes me feel
bloody
the
Benders
Benders.
of
Yeah.
Kansas. Yeah.
And it also sounds like the Pittsburgh Murder House stuff, you know.
How could I
Um,
forget?
right, just like yeah, it's just like stuff like that. It kind of fits that same MO. But anyway, so apparently he made this deathbed confession, allegedly, and specifically said he claimed that he wasn't inherently an evil man and didn't have any malice against these people, but the mountain would whisper to him and tell him to commit these acts.
It sounds like Son of Sam's neighbor's dog or something.
Right, right, exactly. Kind of along with that, again, I'm not sure if it was at the time, but later on, people said that he would, again, like we mentioned, would steal the merchant's wares. There was one specifically where there was a merchant that came through selling, I guess they were like surplus Civil War uniforms at the time. So I assume they were like the wool coats and wool pants and stuff
Wait,
like
I'm
that.
sorry. When was his deathbed confession?
The confession was in 1878, 79.
Oh, okay,
So
okay.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, it does line up in that sense. But like people would see merchants go through, then go missing, and then Matthias would show up in town selling their stuff basically. Again, kind of going into this rumor mill. So whether or not he actually said that or not, who knows? But that's what the lore says. And then it kind of doubles down. And then after he died, apparently when there wasn't a whole lot of people at his funeral, I guess, but there were some pallbearers there, and as they were lowering his casket into the ground, apparently lightning struck the gravestone, blew up the gravestone, and they dropped the ropes, and he ended up landing in the bottom of the grave face down, and they were so scared that that's how they buried him.
Well, isn't that one of the ways that they say to bury vampires? Because that
Mm-hmm.
way, when they try to get out, they'll be confused and they'll end up
Yeah,
digging
yeah,
for a
as
long,
one
long time.
does. Yes.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, that's standard operating procedure. Yep.
Right.
Um, but yeah, no, it is, but it is funny how that stuff like works its way into these kind of stories. But yeah, so he is buried in New Bethel Union Cemetery in Kempton.
And you were able
So
to find the grave and everything.
yep, he is still there.
Oh, wow.
And his wife was eventually buried next to him. Now the gravestones, apparently the gravestone was replaced eventually, but both of those have actually been stolen on multiple occasions.
I'm kind of not surprised by
I'm
that.
not surprised, but I'm also surprised because I guess
I'm
like
wondering, I'm wondering when the thefts began, though.
right. Yeah, I didn't see it. It just said multiple times on two sources I was looking at because I was like, how many times do you have to replace a gravestone before you're like, like I wonder. I just didn't know about the logistics of that. But anywho, he's in the ground, and these stories keep on going. To stick with that specific tavern, one of the things that then kind of ended up happening is there was a family headed by William Turner who bought the house tavern afterwards. He also had a wife, and they had 8 children, so there's 9 of them. And there's a bunch of stories that start with them specifically too, because in the same tavern right afterwards, there was a little girl who was deaf that apparently was playing with a whistle and unfortunately fell down the stairs and died, which is awful. But immediately after and since, people talk about hearing this whistle still in the tavern, which is bone-chillingly spooky. Because I
Yes.
don't know what a whistle from the late 1800s necessarily sounds like that a child will be playing with, but I'm sure it's not the
Well,
thing you want to hear in the middle of the night.
sure.
Because
And
it could have been a
here's
penny, it could have been a penny whistle, I guess, or like
maybe, but I
maybe
think one would differentiate between like a real musical instrument and
versus
I
like
don't, maybe
just
not. My thing is that a whistle sound. I mean, did this happen or did a story created because there's a sound going around? Because a
right.
whistling sound is
Hmm.
so easy for to just kind of occur in nature.
Right.
So, yeah, my question is like, because if you've ever had like a referee whistle that has a cork ball
Yeah.
rolling around it,
Yeah.
you can hear that cork ball. You can hear that this
Hmm.
like thing
Yeah.
doesn't
It's
sound like the whistling of a trees
of
or
something else.
anything.
Right. Yeah. It is very distinct.
Right.
Um, or if none of you have ever played with these, they make little water whistles that look like birds that you put a little bit of water in and then you blow into, and then it sounds like a bird singing.
I have never played with that.
Oh, they are shockingly fun. If you're ever having a slow night, find yourself one of those.
Water
Um,
whistle
yeah,
shaped like a bird.
yeah, shaped like a bird. I'll find one for you. I promise. It's
Okay. I
you'll be
did
happy
get you
about it.
that crow call, right?
Right. Yes. So
Okay, cool.
we can trade those off and on. But now right near there, just just up the way a little bit, still in the same area, still on the what is now the Hawk Mountain Sanctuary area. So this is we're going to be we're keeping this to before it becomes Hawk Mountain Sanctuary. So we'll get to some of the more modern or little more contemporary stuff. But around the same time, this is in the late 1800s. There was a gentleman also named Matthias Berger, who was kind of like some places he's called a Catholic monk, which is, I don't know if that's terribly accurate because usually you don't get monks just like out by themselves in Catholicism.
Yeah, they're
But
not usually free range. They
right,
usually
they're not.
belong because I know we have a
Yeah.
couple
We
monasteries right
do,
around
yeah.
here.
We do, yeah. So like I don't know if he was just maybe Catholic and like some order, like because they say that he had like again, people say church services, but
Right.
again, for an area that is not historically very Catholic at all, how they referred to like those services could be variable.
Maybe he
Um,
was just a man who really had a good love for the sartorial look of a hairsuit.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. So he might have been someone who was like a monk or like a hermit, but he definitely was a devout Christian of some sort. Would educate people and like hold services on Sundays, and was very well liked by the community. Apparently, just 10 out of 10, good dude all around. Apparently, but so he had this little hut at the base of the mountain. One thing he was known for is he had this huge cross that he had built that stood there for a long time that kind of like draw people in. And this isn't far off the road. And again, it's funny because like when you think of like roads, like how long have roads been in certain places? This is one of those areas where like if you're going between the mountains, like there's only so many places to go. Um,
Absolutely.
so like I'm sure these routes were there well before any of these settlers were there. But anyway, so it was rumored that this Matthias Berger had a hoard of gold, which isn't an uncommon thing with hermits. People do talk about hermits actually being very, very rich a lot of times. They're just kind of
Well, they save it up. They don't really, when have you ever heard of a spendy hermit?
right, exactly.
The
Yeah,
hermits don't buy silk pillows, right?
they don't, right. So, but unfortunately, what ended up happening is this was on June 29th, 1890. A hiker named Harry Mahal uh, found came across the hut and found it ransacked. And this is a weird, like, when you come across like certain elements in a story that you're reported a few different places, but they're so like hyper specific that like it sounds real, but it's like just it's
Yes.
too weird. So what was said in a few different places in a few different ways was that this hiker in 1890, just I guess some sort of an outdoors person, because again, hiking wasn't like a pastime in 1890, I
Well,
don't think.
it
Was it?
was. It was Pennsylvania had the Pennsylvania Alpine Club.
Really?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
because Henry Shoemaker was, of course, a famed member of.
Oh, figures. Okay.
I don't. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know if he was a charting member,
Yeah.
But
Gonna have to look that up.
so
Interesting.
there are those sorts of things. I know that there is a tradition among people of the Alpine areas, of which, of
Well,
course,
right.
we have a significant amount
That
of
that's a really
immigrants
good
from.
point. That is a really good point, especially in this area.
Right,
So,
exactly. So I'm going to say that's not, I'm not going to question that. But to your
yeah.
point, real quick, about when you're reading a story and there's
Hmm.
just something highlighted that's just very specific. Interestingly enough, when people are taught how to lie
Hmm.
for, clandestine purposes, whether it be like agency or whatever,
Hmm.
that's one of the things that they're instructed to do is
Oh, really?
really focus on a particular detail that's
Hmm.
just kind of out. Like if you're saying, "Hey, we were here,"
Hmm.
and I remember being there because I was in line and this woman was wearing this really weird paisley shirt. It was like a purple and teal paisley. When have you seen something like that? And I just couldn't stop thinking about it. Little things like that, that
They like
makes things seem more true.
interesting.
Yeah. So
Well,
just
see,
an aside,
hook, line, and sinker over here. Big
pulled you
surprise.
in. Yeah.
Yeah, big surprise. Someone got one over on old Bond over here. That's rare. Um, so, but anyway, but so the detail in this one is that he noticed that there was still rain in some of the buckets, like water in some of the buckets, and that it hadn't rained in about 3 weeks. They were actually in a bit of a drought. So when he saw that, he knew immediately that there was something wrong because those buckets wouldn't have just been left there. And it's not like it rained yesterday, kind of thing. So got a hold of townspeople. They went out and they found his body 2 miles away. And they think that it had been there for about 3 weeks because it had been like scavenged and everything, unfortunately, which is a really awful end. But everyone said it looked like he had been chased. And because the place had been ransacked, they assumed that either someone killed him for his money, or supposed money, either way, whether they found anything or not, like who knows, kind of thing. But either way, that was seen in the area as a really, awful death. And the person, whoever did it, was never caught.
Well, absolutely. And it's awful even if the death was quick and relatively
Right.
bloodless, it's awful just because of the supposed reputation that's
Right.
implied of this
Yeah.
person.
Yeah. Anyone being murdered is bad, obviously, but you can understand how a community would be rocked a little bit harder if it's like, someone who's well respected and, especially,
Or just a child or something
right.
like that.
Exactly.
Obviously,
Like
those are going to impact people more
in
emotionally.
a different, yeah, it appeals to emotions. So, but so that was seen again as like well, the mountain's evil. So that kind of brings us to the close of the 1800s. But again, this is like not far. This is just like a few miles away. This is between actually the Pinnacle and to the west where the Shambacher Tavern is at. So now let's kind of go to modern times. So William Turner, who was the one who had the daughter die, unfortunately, he sold the tavern to Raymond Ingersoll, who then sold it to John E. Wentz, who then donated it to the Hawk Mountain Sanctuary. Maurice and Irma Braun were the first curators of the sanctuary. Um,
Yes, and they wrote a book because I was telling you I have a book somewhere
mhm,
on my shelf.
yeah,
And I've given it away, I realize, but that I
as we
am
do.
nearly certain her name in particular
Hmm.
was on that.
Yeah, yeah, no, that checks out because again, these are relatively well-known people in the early environmental community around here for sure.
Yeah, I
And
want to say they did they take it over in the 40s or 50s, was it?
1938.
Yeah, that
Right,
sounds
right.
right. Yeah.
But so now they're the ones who lived in the Schembacher Tavern as their house. And this is where you first start to see a lot of these ghost stories really popping up and getting kind of more well documented because they had visitors all the time and they had well connected, friends and colleagues stopping over often. Um,
Well,
so
and
that
people not only they're stopping and experience, but they're taking those stories out.
out, right.
Whereas the people that have been there before are largely staying in, or the
Hmm.
stories are staying in the immediate community.
Right. So it kind of adds to the folklore there a bit. This is when we start to see a lot of these things, like we said. And both the Bronze and also William Turner from earlier, both referenced to people in the community finding what they thought were human bones on multiple occasions around the property. But again, no charges were ever brought because it's like just like one little bone here kind of thing in there. Because again, but that lines up with this Schambacher guy because his original Matthias, because if he was scattering the bones around, that's how they would have ended up being, even though it was quite a bit later. But so people at this time start reporting the things you would expect: ghost lights, shadow people, apparitions, this whistle from this girl, supposedly. One of the big things is these disembodied sounds and voices. A lot of shouts of what sound like people being tortured in the barn specifically. And the house has all kinds of like, kind of like electrical and water related phenomena happening. Um, which again, part of you wants to chalk it up to just being like, oh, it's an
I was gonna
old
say an old
house.
house is gonna have,
Yeah.
yeah, the waterproofing wasn't what,
Hmm.
especially in the basement. But my question is, did the barn exist back then?
It did, and that's where
Okay.
people said, because there was one traveler, and I'm sure this, like, again, who knows if this is apocryphal or not,
That's where the
but
sausage attachment was for
right.
the
Well,
KitchenAid.
there was one traveler who at the time said that he got a weird vibe off of the guy, like thought the sausage tasted funny and decided to get out of there, kind of thing. Another guy was apparently saw him like cleaning blood off of the barn, like
Yeah,
off of
you
the
did
sides.
say that the
Like
blood was
that comes
everywhere.
up all the time. There's just blood apparently everywhere.
And again, and this is in an era where many people are butchering their own meat and everything.
Right.
It's not particularly crazy
Yeah,
to see
it's
blood. So it must have been
a
a
lot for people to
prodigious
notice it.
amount.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it would have been like today. Yeah. Like again, if I'm at my house and if I see a dime-sized drop of blood somewhere that it shouldn't be, I'm like, what the heck happened? Like, who's bleeding? What did I
Right.
nick? Like, is the cat okay? Like we just don't see it as much. So you're seeing all kinds of these stories happen. There's apparition stories of not only the girl but also of Schambacher, specifically an apparition of him wielding a hatchet that apparently chases people off of the property.
Wait, the hatchet does or him wielding it?
Him wielding the hatchet.
Okay.
So you get an apparition of Schambacher with a hatchet that chases people off of the property. And again, you see a lot of orbs and everything in the whole area, not just in the Schambacher Tavern, but the whole place is apparently just, like I said, lousy with ghost lights and orbs and things like that. So I was like, okay, this like checks out and everything. And then there was a few other things that I found from today. And again, this Schambacher Tavern, I should say, is on the National Register of Historic Places. Like this isn't like a uh, an unknown little cabin in the woods. It is a like a well documented place that people are going into. Maybe not often, but it is being looked after. Apparently now it's used as like an administrative type building where people who work for the sanctuary use it. I'm not sure if it's like a residence, but they do use it for the sanctuary because it's on that property. And you still get stories all over the place of people seeing, especially these apparitions. That's one of the, like I said, that's one of the biggest ones. Which again I think is interesting. Is like apparitions are probably not the most common thing. So whenever you have a lot of different stories about them over a long period of time, because like we're like used to hearing about apparitions now and everything, and I really don't know how much they were in like the zeitgeist back
I
then.
I
Like
believe
they
they were
were,
based on
but
stories, but at
hmm
the same time, even today, with all the different ghost hunting shows and all that
hmm
jazz, most people I think are going to be pretty quick to say, even in that scene,
yeah,
that the full body apparition is just the rarest of rare things, that it's somewhat
hmm
questionable how real it is.
right. And so then there was three other things that I came across that I thought were interesting with this place. One of them was this tavern was investigated in the late 1970s by Ed and Lorraine Warren.
I'm already changing my mind. It's totally not haunted at
It's
all.
not haunted at all. It's so not haunted that they said no one should ever be allowed to investigate it again. And I know you guys can hear our tone of voice changing, but but I do think it's interesting that that it at least had enough. It was known enough socially.
Juice.
Yeah, it had. Yeah, like, but it was known enough in the area that at least got the attention of people that prominent in paranormal investigation at the time.
Sure.
But I honestly I couldn't find any like transcripts or anything, just like a few like quotes, and that was the one that I kind of pulled that I was like, no one should ever be allowed to investigate it. Like it's that bad. But you have like people working there, you know? Um,
Yeah, I was gonna say, where does
so
this fit into OSHA regulations?
right, right. Well, that's a good point. But so that was interesting. And then the two that I really liked, just because they were different. One is a and this is again, this is where like I'd love to talk to an expert about this because it just like doesn't track. A 10-foot tall ghost of a specifically all white ghost, 10-foot tall of a Native American with a long white beard.
Okay, I'm calling shenanigans
Yeah, that was
because my thinking is this. Okay, and again, being somewhat on the inside of this, being native and
yeah.
whatnot a bit, it's when you have mixed people with mixed ethnicity,
Hmm.
very, very, very few, fully indigenous people of North America and South America grow much in the way of facial hair.
Right.
So I don't know when they're saying this spirit is from, but
Yeah.
because
It's
again,
just
the
it's
people of European and
hmm
indigenous ancestry, and even African and
hmm
indigenous have been, bumping unfortunates for
right.
a couple centuries now. But even then,
So yeah,
I
like
don't know.
that story that keeps coming up, people saying they see this apparition specifically along the road in this area. Sounds like they're just trying to like insert a Native American element onto one of the
Well,
stories to add
yeah,
something. And it's just like, I don't know. So, but a 10-foot tall, all white ghost was interesting. Because you don't, it's like, it's very specific. It's very like Scooby-Doo sounding, to me.
agreed.
Um, Now, the one that I'm super excited about that I want to go look for specifically um, is a abnormally large, mysterious, they said in most places, all white ghost bird, which
This
fits.
skips right into your Thunderbird thing.
I know this is my Thunderbird thing. They keep coming up. I did order that book for you guys who were curious. I did order that book. So you're going to get a Thunderbird episode at some point here once I get through my other 4 books that I have to read for this podcast. But I love the idea of a Hawk Mountain sanctuary having a abnormally large, all white ghost bird of some sort. That's just cool.
But what I need to know is, okay, were the reports of this ghost bird prior to it being the sanctuary? Because
No,
otherwise, it seems
yeah, it
like one
looks
of
modern.
those.
They seem modern. Yeah.
Yeah, it just seems one of those. We're going to write in, a story about
Right.
this.
Yeah.
We have to tie it to the place. Just like, okay, you're gonna have a Native American because
Of the
this
supposed
region
raid. Yeah.
had,
Hmm. Yeah.
meh.
Yeah. And again, like specifically with the Native American stuff, like I couldn't find anything specifically, I couldn't find anything from a native point of view saying why this area either was or wasn't like either important or sacred, or if there was any just I couldn't find anything from that perspective. So as far as I'm concerned, all of that is dubious. So
Agreed.
so
Because
yeah.
here's the deal. Even if you had, here's one of my things I say about these sorts of things quite
Hmm.
frequently is even if you have, particularly this far east, a
Hmm.
person of, indigenous ancestry, and they're commenting on how people felt in this region about a specific thing or whatnot. Well, I the reason why pan-Indianism became a big thing, like with
Mm-hmm.
AIM, the Indian movement in the
Mm-hmm.
1960s and 70s,
Yeah.
was for the same reason a lot of like the Pan-Africanism became a very like a rallying call for a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people of African ancestry in America because so much of that collective history was lost.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's the ugly part of
Right.
our history. And
Yeah.
so I mean, I'm not trying to disparage a person, but I mean, you're coming off a little too confident in saying like these people here who the story, the chain has
Mm-hmm.
been way disruptive that we
Mm-hmm.
can make any conclusive statement about
Right.
what they felt unless we have contemporary statements.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
Can
And
is it contemporary or what's the word for statements from the time when they were still
yeah.
and you only have to you can still go to the lumber era and there's still a
Mm-hmm.
lot of indigenous people here
Right.
from the Iroquois confederacies and
Mm-hmm.
whatnot.
Yeah, so it just I like you said, I did just want to call that out that like in none of these sources that I found were there was that voice. So, um but I think it is a interesting collection of stories that all kind of points back to this area being having a lot of folklore associated with it and having these kind of like uh multiple tragedies in a small area.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the thing that gets me because even if I'm going and I probably will say, maybe that because this is just an area where a lot of people have been and traveled through. And for whatever reason, maybe it's spooky looking, and so it's going to
hmm
accumulate stories. Well, even then, the things that we know that have transpired there,
hmm
I think it gets to be when things get to a number, they accumulate a
Yeah,
critical mass,
right.
where just the sensible thing is like, you know what? Nothing's there, but let's not risk it.
Let's not, yeah.
Let's let's
Yeah.
take the long way.
Yeah, let's yeah, let's stay
Sure, it's a
ahead.
mountainous area, but there's only so many roads, as you said earlier. Let's
hmm
take the other one.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good way of approaching this. But I do want to go out to Hawk Mountain, not because no, not only because it's supposed to be very beautiful and boy do I like watching birds.
Indeed, you
But
do.
I sure do. Um But now that I've read so much about this area, I'd love to go out there and actually see these places. Because again, these places are all
Absolutely.
these like we know where all these folks are buried. We know where the houses are at. We know where this monk's cabin was. We know where the Gerhard cabin was.
We can
Um,
touch the history.
yeah, which is just like in so like that I think is kind of unique. Where usually whenever you get a whole bunch of stories about an area, they're just kind of like one you know, it's a little bit of a house of cards.
Right. It's
Like,
usually the one standing structure that remains gets all these stories
right,
glommed onto it. That,
right,
or there was a place, but it's gone now. But whether there was ever an actual place there is questionable.
right. And the fact that we have this area where it's like, whether or not it's actually haunted or not, who knows? But like we know where the bodies are buried. We know where the houses are at. We know these people died. We know that so like there actually is a decent amount of documentation around some of the at least parts of these stories, which is not always the case with things like this. So um I thought that was interesting. So that again, whenever you have all this happening, and then you have the Pinnacle Man disappearance or mystery, just a few miles to the east from all this.
Yeah, I think you said like six
Yeah,
miles.
yeah, yeah, like yeah, less than 6 miles, I think. And from where he was actually found, not so much the Pinnacle, but you can understand why people start to be like, oh, this is just kind of a weird area. It's
Let's
like
take
there's
the
just
long
all these
way.
yeah, there's all these mysteries. There's all these mysteries. Um, so if you out there have a area that you know is just lousy with ghosts, with disappearances, with untimely happenings, let us know because we want to look into them. again, this is very Berks County specific. With for the last 2 weeks, we do enjoy looking at things all over the place, though. So, if you do have anything you want us to look into or have a story you'd like to share, you can find us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, or you can simply send us an email at theghostfurnacepodcast@gmail.com.